Hi class, Mr. Wallace, and welcome to week 3 of CYB410, Defensive Security. This week, we're looking at disaster recovery, compliance standards, physical, I can say that word, yes, physical security. Chapters, that's 7, 8, and 9, yeah. Disaster recovery, chapter 7, industry compliance frameworks, physical security. As always, we got our threaded discussions and great inputs on your threaded discussions from week 2. Some really good comments there. And again, always keep it with your journal article and review. All right, let's take a look at for this week. What we got going on? Well, I kind of flipped these around for you, but we're going to talk about first physical security. Very important area with respect to defensive posture within an organization. So, and when we look at this, we can actually break this up into really kind of 2 categories: security engineering. Then we're talking from a physical perspective: security engineering and security operations. Okay, so when we think about security engineering, this is really how we build security into the physical infrastructure. Everything, if you want to talk about from restricted access, how do we maintain access control in the physical environment? With whether it's locks, whether it's turnstiles or man traps. If you've heard of man traps, man trap, if you haven't, actually you've probably been in buildings where you open one door, you walk through that door, and that door closes before the next door can open. So for a second there, you're in what's called like a man trap. And there they can, sometimes they have scan equipment, or they can do, physical searches while you're in that man trap. And then once you're cleared, the other door opens and you're able to go in, excuse me, into the facility. But whether we're talking fences and all of those things are part of that whole restricted area access. How do we keep people out of data centers and server rooms? Because typically you just don't want to have anyone in your organization to have access to those facilities. Now here's a big one: utilities and HVAC, your heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. These are very critical areas when it comes to understanding security within your facility. How does utilities get in and out of a building? Airflow, humidity. All of these things that are controlled by your HVAC systems. Who has access to those? Because here again, insider threat, or if I'm a malicious actor, yeah, if I've got access to your utilities, your control panels, those type things, and now I can cause a lot of damage. If I can just shut off your AC, I know that temperature in the server in your data center is going to start going up, and pretty soon your network is going to be out. Fire prevention, a lot of things to be aware of with respect to fire prevention. One is detection. How do you detect fires? Do you have alarm systems within your building? What type of fire prevention systems do you have? Many different types of sprinkler systems or deluge systems, and how those work. Is it just water? Do you have foam? Other type of fire retardants in that environment? Again, water and moisture, big thing. How do you keep water out of facilities? And not just water, but humidity, especially around electronics. Maintaining humidity is very important, because without it, you can have, if the humidity becomes too high, you're susceptible to corrosion, rust, and things like that. If the humidity is too low, then you're susceptible to more static electricity, static charges as you're walking, like across carpets and rugs. That's what gives you that static charge many times, because the humidity is off. Your wiring, very similar to your utilities, being aware of your wiring closets, your not just electrical wiring, but also your network cables. If you've got Cat 5 or Cat 6, Ethernet cable running, fiber optic cable, wireless connections, all of those things are very important with respect to how you design, build, and control the infrastructure of your environment. How do you the engineering part. Then when we think about security operations, now we think about things like access control. How do I control access? Do I have badge readers? Does everyone have a key? And if we do have most locations now, you have some type of swipe badge reader. And how is that system maintained? Who updates it? Who ensures that individuals have access to the areas or to the spaces they need to get to, but do not have access to spaces that they're not cleared to go to? Monitoring systems, whether it's intrusion detection systems, those things, cameras. It could be many types of sensors that you could have in your environment to monitor day-to-day activities. Visitor control. This is a big one. Visitor control. How do you control visitors? One, when they come to an organization, and to ensure that they are cleared to come into your facility. Maintaining visitor control is supreme. We've talked about locks, keys, but this is more so key management. Who has a key? Who doesn't have a key? Who should have a key? All that's part of that. Badges, how you control badges, and alarms. So you see there's many aspects to physical security. This is a security competency all its own. So whether you're talking about from an engineering perspective, how we build security in, or from a day-to-day operations perspective, how we maintain security within that environment. And I will tell you, the organization where I work, there's a very close tie between physical security, cybersecurity. As a matter of fact, depending on what control what control family or what frameworks you use, there's typically a family of controls that govern physical security and how we operate in that environment. Now, what happens many times when we have something go wrong in our environment and we have a disaster? Disaster recovery. This is a huge area. Now, not to confuse disaster response with incident response. They are not the same. Or continuity of operations. Those three things, sometimes we kind of throw them in the same bucket, but they're not. So disaster recovery is, we've had a disaster. Now, what are the things we need to do to recover after that disaster, which is a little different than continuity of operations, meaning that it could be a long-term thing. How do we continue to operate while we're going through this disaster? So here we're talking disaster recovery, right? So these are some of the large steps that you look at within this disaster recovery frameworks. You want to be sure you have some type of security assessment and testing procedures for your disaster recovery procedure. Now, some elements of those is definitely, like we talked about last week, our training, awareness, always have good training and a business continuity plan so that while we're going through disaster, we can ensure that we can maintain some level of business continuity. How do we secure security operations within that will support our disaster recovery policy and procedures? Everything from backups, storage strategies, also how do you recover, backup and recovery strategies, a big part of that. We need multiple processing sites, such as a hot site, a warm site, or a cold site. And so what we talked about there is that if we think we're in an area where we can have some type of natural disaster, hurricanes, tornadoes, what happens if our facility is shut down? Do we move to a cold site? Cold site, basically, that's just an empty building that you already got staged, but you don't have anything in there. Now you got to stand up everything from scratch. Great thing about a cold site, they're pretty inexpensive. Bad thing, it takes time to get everything built up. A hot site, now that's basically, it's a parallel site to set up so that if site A goes down, I can just move the people and move operations right into my recovery site because I've already got equipment, I've already got data, and everything's sitting there. It's parallel. It's a mirror site of what I have up operating. But that is, here again, great recovery speed. However, the con to that, you got it. Show me the money. Show me the money. They are expensive. And somewhere in the middle, we have what we call warm sites. And a warm site is just that. I'm not as bare metal as I am in a cold site. I may have some infrastructure there. I've already got some computers, maybe a couple of servers, and I may have some data stored there that's a certain age. I may keep 30 days of data stored there. However, it's not a full mirror like a hot site. So if a disaster happens, we've got to bug out and go to that site. It's still going to take me some time to get up and running, but it's not going to take as much time as it did if I had a cold site. Things we also look at is system resiliency. How high is the availability? Meaning, do I have redundancy? Fault tolerance. Redundancy means that I've got multiple servers, or I've got mirrored servers. Fault tolerance is if something fails, it fails safe or fails over to where my operations continue to go. Other things we look at within this disaster recovery as we do our planning checklist is what about our recovery processes? What is our response time? What personnel? What individuals should be a part of that disaster response team? And the biggest one, probably right here, the communications plan. How do we communicate when there's a disaster, especially when you have natural disasters or water main breaks and boom, your whole server farm or your data center is just flooded? How do we communicate now when our main process of communicating is gone? And this is what many times we don't walk through those processes because we become so reliant on email or on our phone systems that once they're gone, we don't really have a secondary way of or backup way of communicating out to get people done. Assessments and restoration. How much damage was done? What it's going to cost to restore that? And again, you see it all the time. Training and awareness. As we get smarter in these areas, those should all enter into our training and awareness program so that we're able to replicate what we've done when there's natural disaster. And how do we test those plans? Different ways of testing that disaster recovery plans from what we'll call a read through. And these are kind of really based on how much money you have, how much time and resources. A read through is just that. We've got policy, we've got a scenario, and we basically kind of sit around the table and read through that scenario, and we walk and each individual says, well, this is what I would do, this is my responsibility. A walkthrough gets a little more in depth, meaning that now we're going to actually walk through these things, almost like a dress rehearsal, right? We're going to walk through, well, this is what I would do. I would go into this room and do this. Wouldn't actually do it, but I can walk through that. And sometimes these are called tabletops. We do those with tabletop. A simulation, that's where, depending on where you are, we're able to simulate some type of outage, and then we can test our response to that outage. Now, you get more expensive when we talk about parallel. Parallel effort means that now I've got my site up and running, but now I've got a second site where I can actually simulate this disaster, and actually walk through that. But since I have two sites running, I'm still able to process, but I can actually simulate my disaster on another site. And the biggest one right here, this gets expensive and dangerous, we call full interruption. That's where we say, you know what? We're not going to play. We're not going to simulate. We're going to actually do a real outage. Most of us don't get there. Day to day, really, the read through, walk through, and sometimes simulation is where most of us operate at with respect to testing our disaster recovery plans. Now, some things to remember here is what I call key time objectives. Now, if you've ever studied for any type of security certification, whether it's a Security Plus or CISSP, you've heard these terms and you're probably going, oh, I'm not sure what they mean, but you maybe did it and understood it enough to pass the test. But if you didn't, we're going to walk through this, okay? So here's the scenario, all right? We're starting here, we're in normal operations. Everything is good. The sun is shining. Puppies are running around. Little deer, they're jumping fences, and there's little flowers. Can you smell them? Yes, life is good. Normal operations. And then, bam, we have a disaster. It could be a hurricane. It could be a natural disaster. It could be a man-made disaster. But some type of disaster happens. From there, we go into recovery mode. And from recovery mode, now we want to get back to normal operation. When the deer come back and the flowers start to grow again. And I don't know why I'm talking in this voice, but it just feels right. So let's look at some timelines. So this period right here, this is called an RPO, Recovery Point Objective. Okay, and RPO means the amount of data that you will lose if you need to restore from a backup. So this is right here. This is based on the amount of data, meaning that I need to have 30 days backed up, or 7 days backed up, or 1 day. And this drives, especially with your IT community, how much storage you need, the recovery times, so that we know that we're backing up every 30 days, right? And a disaster happens. Well, I'm going to lose 30 days of new data because that's gone, because my latest backup is 30 days old. That's why you probably want to back up weekly. That way, if we have a disaster, I've only lost 7 days of data because I'm backing up every 7 days. Now, if you got the resources, you've got the storage space, like I say, you're running NetApps or some type of persistent storage, you may be backing up every 24 hours, which is great because we have a disaster. All I've lost is the last 24 hours. That's what RPO is how much data I would lose. That's recovery point, the point of data time when how much data I would lose if at this point based on my backup and recovery plan. Now, another term you're going to hear is RTO. RTO is recovery time objective. And what is recovery time objective? That's the amount of time to restore your application and reload data so that the user can access it. How long is it going to take for me to restore data? Because boom, when this disaster happened, we're not working. Okay, we're down. So can I restore this, get things back up to this recovery point? Is it going to take 1 day? Is it going to take 5 days? Is it going to take 8 days? How much time is this going to take? Because this is a very critical one for depending on your business, right? Depending on what your business is, that could mean the difference between life and, when I say life and death, financial life, financial death. That if we're out of business, if we're not up in X amount of days, we're going to shut it down. Okay, we're going to have to shut it down. So let's say if you were in, Louisiana, New Orleans, when that major hurricane came through, a lot of businesses were shut down. Why? Because they could not recover. The amount of time it took them to recover, they've already lost their customer base. They are not able to, if you're in manufacturing, we're not able to manufacture and build this part, get it shipped out to our consumers. And so at that point, we're done. Close the doors, board it up. Very important to know these two within your organization. What is your recovery point objective? What is your recovery time objective? Now, another key one is what we call WRT, work recovery time. That's the time it takes to return to normal operations after your data recovery. See, because once you hit this point, many times you're still not up 100%. Now I've got data up and use it, and we're starting to do things, but get that production line running to where now we are cranking things out at the end of that production line. That's what this is another part of that critical timeline. So I'm up and running, but are my doors open and am I running at 100%? That's what your work recovery time. All that adds together to what your maximum downtime can be. Again, this is a operational number right here. Well, how much time can we be down from the time that a disaster happened until the time that we are back in normal operation? Because that's the time that that your business owner will have to know, so that we know that we're going to either shut the doors or we're back up and running. Very critical. RPO, recovery point objective, which is based on the data point. How much how much data do we need to have backed up, or what's the most we can afford to lose? Okay, that's RPO. RTO, recovery time objective. Again, that's the amount of time it's going to take for us to recover data so that we can start working again. WRT, work recovery time. That's the amount of time from the time that we started our recovery efforts till we're back to normal operations. And all those last three especially goes into the MTD, your maximum downtime. This is the time from the time that the disaster hit to the time that we're back to normal operations. And if that time is so long that we've lost our customer base, then yeah, we're done. We're done. So we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about compliance and compliance frameworks. Now, what is the framework, right? Well, yeah, I got it written up here. A framework is the guide or a template used to develop security processes, procedures, roles, and responsibilities. There are a lot of different frameworks out there. Like I say, you got the ISO standards, the 27,000 standards, 27,001, I think it goes through 27,005 or 6. And then there's the IEC standards. And these are all standards that deal with information security. Then you have the NIST Cybersecurity framework. That really did, I think the Department of Commerce, if I'm not mistaken, built that standard. And really a lot of our critical infrastructure, they use that particular standard. The one that I'm most familiar with, I worked a lot with, is RMF, Risk Management Framework. And for federal information systems, our government systems like the Department of Defense, other government agencies, we fall underneath that. And this is the one I'm going to use as an example to kind of peel back what these standards could look like and what do they mean to us. And another one, a big one that you see in different industries and everything is, COVID, which is your control objectives for information and related technologies. And this is just a handful. If you're in other industries, like in the medical industry, you may have HIPAA. And you may have heard of that. That's the HIPAA. That's an act of Health Insurance Protection and Privacy Act. If you're a federal, a publicly traded company, you may have controls levied on you by the Graham's Billings Leach Act, GBLA. So there are multiple. If you're in the finance or in the credit card type of industry, you may have PCI DSS. So here again, all these standards, even though they sound very different, they have very similar things in common. Is that this is how we implement security controls. This is really kind of the menu or the palette that we use to develop and implement security controls in these different environments. Like I say, the one that I am familiar with, and we just use this as an example, walk through this, is the Risk Management Framework. And this was, and there's a NIST, a National Institute of Standards and Technology, special publication 837. These are all readily available out there. The text talks about what the NIST, what the Risk Management Framework is. RMF, like I say, it's a 6-step process or 6-step framework that starts with categorization, selecting, where this is where you, in that categorization step, this is where you categorize your risk, okay? And you have ways of categorizing this risk based on different risk factors. These risk factors within the risk management framework is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. What is going to be the risk to confidentiality, risk to maintaining integrity, and risk to maintain availability of our information. So once you categorize a system, now you can say, well, based on the categorization and we categorize it based on moderate, high, or low risk. So let's say we'd say, for this particular information that we're trying to protect, confidentiality may be moderate, meaning that, yeah, we want to keep it secret, but it's not the highest thing. Integrity could be high. Like I said, if we work for a financial institution, we want to ensure that the integrity of your banking information stays, pristine. So we may have a high there, and availability could be medium. So out of that menu of high, moderate, I said medium, I'm sorry, moderate and low, this is how we can categorize a system. Once we've categorized it, then we can select the controls based on that categorization that we need to apply to maintain the fact that we're meeting our categorization. Then once we've selected controls, then we implement those controls. Okay, so selecting controls would be that, okay, we need to apply access controls, account management controls, auditing controls, system boundary or system communications controls. So like I said, within the risk management framework, there's about 8 to actually about 21 families of controls that can be applied. And overall, it's a menu of over about probably close to 1,000 controls that can be applied within this environment. Then, once you select them based on your categorization, many times that number drops. Let's say if you categorized your system as confidentiality moderate, integrity moderate, and availability low. Out of that 1,000 to 1,100 control buffet, that menu, you would only have to implement maybe about 430, 440 of those controls. Once you select the controls, then we implement them. Yeah, now we're going to actually go in, the procedures it takes to do those. Now, not only are we going to implement, then we're going to assess those controls. How do we know those controls are working? And once we understand they're working, then we can say, okay, let's get an approval to operate. I think we're ready to operate. That's when we get authorization to operate. Now we're operating. Now we want to monitor those controls. All right, okay, let me give you an analogy of this, okay? And something you probably do every day in your home. Let's say you and your wife, or you and your husband, or you and your significant other, you just purchased a home, not a brand new home. It was a pre-owned, and you purchased that home. And the first thing, you walk in the house and you go, okay, what are we going to do? We're going to want to be sure that we feel secure. So we're going to change door locks. We're going to get a security system, and we're going to put locks on the windows. Okay, because we looked at the house and we did a categorization that we feel basically safe, but we feel that we want to be sure that no one can come in through the front door or the back door. And because we looked at the risk, so we categorized our risk based on the, and we're on a corner lot, so we need to be sure that we've got, some coverage of cameras or whatever in these areas. Okay, so now from that we selected the controls. Yeah, new locks. We're going to put in new locks on the windows, and we're going to put up security cameras. We're going to get some Ring cameras to set up around the house. So we selected 3 controls, right, that we're going to do. Next, we say, let's implement those controls. So what do? We jump in our little pickup truck. We drive to Home Depot or Lowe's, depending on which one you like the best, and we buy what we need. So we go look, and door locks, yes, they've got them. Window locks, they've got them. And we go over and look at Ring, and we go, wow, that's a little expensive. I don't think we can afford that right now. All right, so now we have to come up with a plan of action to get the Ring, because we can't afford it right now. But we take the door locks home, we take the window locks home. And now we're going to put those, walk up, put the new locks, put the new door lock, put the new deadbolt. We've got the window locks. But how do we know they work? Then we assess. And for door locks, we do the international assessment that everyone does. If you've ever changed the door lock, here's your assessment. You grab it, you shake it 5 times to be sure that it doesn't come open. And then, if you like most people, you're going to go outside, you're going to lock the door with the key, go outside, put the key in, turn it, and hopefully you get back in the house. So you've just assessed that control. Yes, my door locks are working. Same thing with windows. You put the little window locks on, and what you grab the bottom of the window and you shake it. That's your assessment plan, and you tested it. And you step back and, you pat yourself on the back going, I am great. I've just implemented the controls that I've selected. You look at your significant other, and they're looking at you like, really? Really? You're going to go there? You just put one lock in, and now you're, Tim the Tool Man. So, but, you ask them, hey, do you feel safe now? Do you feel, sense of security? Yeah, guess so. Okay, great. So what we're going to do, we're going to lock the door. It's about 10 o'clock at night, time to go to bed. But what do we do every night before we go to bed? We're going to check that lock to be sure, hey, and they're going to ask you, hey, babe, did you check the locks to be sure the door was locked before you come to bed? Yes. That is monitoring. That's how you continuously monitor that control based on the way it was selected, based on how it was implemented, and how you assessed it to be sure that that control is still doing what it's supposed to do. So that's really the 6 steps of RMF. And even though this is risk management framework, you pick any of those other frameworks we just talked about, and they have a very similar process. It may be called different words, but you're going to see similar type of process, and you're going to see this. That most of them operate in some type of continuous circle. Meaning why? Because threats and risk change all the time. If the threats change, then I have to go back and probably recategorize. And because if something changed in your environment, something changed in your neighborhood, that, you know what, I don't like the way it feels now. You get some new neighbors, and they got kids running all over the place, and you go, and they look a little shady. So now the risk changed. The attack surface now have to be adjusted based on the risk. So now you may say, you know what, we need to really get those locks put in now. So now let's reassess. We're going to change our budget around so we can get those Ring cameras put up sooner than later. So that's why this is a circle, because you reassess, you recategorize, you selected or implemented different controls, you assess them, you monitored, and now you're going to go back to that circle again. Almost any control, any framework, regardless of whether it's RMF or any of these on this previous list, the ISO 27000 series, the NIST cybersecurity ones, COVID, whatever they are, they all follow basically the same pattern. So don't get nervous and bent out of shape, like, well, I never heard of risk management framework, or I'm not in the government, so I'm not ever going to see this. It doesn't matter. The concept basically the same. Just like you secure your house, this is how we secure our networks in businesses and in the federal government. So, all right, let's kind of bring these pieces together, because really, again, and I say this looks very similar to what if you remember from week 1, I like tying things together because to me, it makes a lot more sense. So like I say, when we think about how we categorize the system. So we think about the information system. This road's gonna be the how, but this is how the RMF steps. This is how we categorize. And why do we do it? Because there's risk. In this first step, just like we did when we bought our new house, we're gonna identify the information the system's gonna process. Now, as we start to build out the capability more, we're gonna select controls. So what we're doing, we're selecting controls need to do what? Protect the information. In any class I teach, I'm always going to talk about the information more than the information system, because the information system is there to allow individuals who need information to communicate. It's not about the information system completely. Now, as we go into these other steps, we're going to produce what? Implement controls that will allow us to protect the information. We go into step 4. We're assessing controls. Why? Because we want to verify the controls needed to protect the information work. Go to step 5, we authorize. Why? We want to quantify risk and limitations of those controls needed to protect the information. And when we get to step 6, what are we doing? We've got a full capability built out, and we want to continuously monitor. Why? We want to monitor the controls needed to do what? You got it. Protect the information. You see, it all comes back to about the information. So we just bring all those pieces together. All right, guys, I hope you have a great week 3. This is, like I say, a lot of information from a lot of different angles on this class. But when we think about defensive security or defensive cyber, these are some of the pieces to come together. But you want to keep it simple. Always remember, we are about protecting the information. God bless. Hope to see you week 4.